So this should be a cracker. Gary's actually won 14 of the last 15 games, so this should be really interesting to watch. And then getting underway, Brian is starting. So a reasonably good rack for Brian to start off with. No bonus available, but the potential to draw into one. Some good bonus tiles to keep. Looks like he's playing very quickly, and he's going to start with Inlay, which seems pretty reasonable. Keeps the S back for the next move. 24 points. And Gary has had a very nice first draw. So he'll be very pleased to see that rack. And I'm sure we'll be seeing him find one of the bonuses he has available here. In fact, the only bonus he has available here. In 2 positions, he has a 7 on his rack. So I'm sure he will just checking to make sure if he has any 8-letter plays as well. Gary, very experienced tournament player, will know his high probability 7s. And I'm sure he will be finding and playing Aneroid here. The only question is, where does he play it? Does he play it making DI, or does he play it making ID? There are pluses and minuses to both. The slightly more defensive position might be to play it on top in terms of counter plays on the triple underneath it. On the other hand, the higher position does give away potential J or Z counter plays on top. So there are pluses and minuses, and not easy to pick the right play here, pick the right position. If is there a right position or is there a wrong position, it's very nuanced. But Aneroid on top is the choice, and that goes down for 63, so nice start for Gary. Brian has got 5 vowels, so he hasn't drawn well following his Inlay play. So he'll be looking to get rid of some of those duplicate vowels here. He'd like to get rid of the A and the I and the U if at all possible, to keep AINS or something similar, to give himself a good chance of bonusing next move. He might think about something like Unai, UNAI, if that even plays on this board in a good position. That's what he's lined up. And it does play underneath Inlay, so that might be a reasonably good option here. Going into this tournament, Brian and Gary had played each other 9 times previously, and there's a record of 5-4 in Brian's favour, so they're very evenly matched players. And actually Brian spotted that Unai plays on top of Aneroid, so that's an even better position than I mentioned earlier, so that's a nice find for Brian, good spot. And helps to balance his rack for next time. Gary, meanwhile, has got 6 vowels, so I would not be at all surprised to see him change here. His scoring options are going to be fairly limited, with 3 A's, 2 E's, GI. You could play something like AIGA, AIGA, underneath Inlay, or Agi on top of Unai that Brian has just played. But all his best plays keep 3 vowels. He's making a play here, and he's playing Agila. So that's 10 points. Interesting choice there. It's just being held. Brian's having to think about whether to challenge that play. It's a sort of word that doesn't get played very often, and I'm not surprised that Brian is having to think about this one. It looks like he's accepted the play. And he has, so that's 10 points for Gary, clears off some of his vowels, but keeps 3 on his rack. Brian is also quite vowel heavy here. So he'll be looking to get rid of probably the F here, at least one of the O's, possibly the G, in fact, possibly the 4 tiles he's just picked up. His best leave here is likely to be something like AGS or IGS. You could play something like Foo, F-O-O, on top of Unai, making Or. That would score 27 points. Fog in the same position, although that keeps 3 vowels. Meanwhile, while this decision is being made, Harshan's results from the last round has come in, and we are now watching first versus second in this game, and not second versus third. Harshan had a very narrow defeat by 4 points to Jack Moran. So we have 3 players 15-4 now, including these 2 on the stream. And Brian has opted for Goofy here, which looks like a reasonable option, keeping AIS. Gary's had an interesting draw to his leave of AEE. He's picked out both C's and the Q. So that's a very tricky rack to navigate this time round. He does have a fairly simple Q dump here, but he looks like he's changing. So he could have played Caddy, but he's obviously decided to go for leave here. And it's hard to criticise that. That's a good choice. He's exchanged CEQ, and ACEN is a really good leave. So, yeah, I think that's a savvy choice by Gary. Brian, meanwhile, has got 2 S's. Scores are very even. So Brian will be just looking to see if he can find any playable bonuses here. So he doesn't actually have anything that scores a huge amount here. So he'll be looking to get rid of the worst of his tiles, which is probably the F and the O, and find a way to give himself a good chance next move. So he might look to play something like Of on top of Unai. There's a nice slotted in Faro, F-A-R-O, between Agila and Goofy, making A-row. That would keep both of the S's, so he might consider doing something like that. He could just play something hooking the S onto inlay, like Fars, F-A-S. There's only one E being played so far, so there's a good chance of drawing into an E. And for that reason, I might think perhaps Of is a good choice here, because if you pick an E and a decent consonant, you're going to be bonusing a lot of the time on the next play. So I quite like the option of here. But there are several good plays which all do very similar things to the rack, and it might just be down to what Brian prefers and what he thinks is his best chance of bonusing on the next move. Brian having a good think about this. Maybe considering if there's a possible double-double play available through the A and the R. Brian's a very analytical player, and he'll be really thinking about all the merits of the different moves here. He's calculating, I'm sure, there, thinking about what are his best chances of hitting a good score over the next couple of moves. It looks like Ov is going to go down, and that looks like a really strong play. Gives him a good leave. So yes, well found. And so back to Gary. Gary has some good tile on his rack. He kept a good lead from his exchange. Has drawn a second A. Just as we look at Gary's rack, Brian has drawn an E and another S. Now Gary is going to play, making Arvo in that position here. So it looks like Crave is going down. That looks like one of his best plays here. 39 points. Could have also played using Cone and Afar. Could have played something like Carve or Carver or Cave. But Crave goes down for 39 points. And Brian has an abundance of S's. 3 S's on his rack. And Gary's kept a nice AN leave, so we should see what he draws into that. See if he can pick something nice to go with it. You may notice Gary has a habit of placing his hand over his tiles, as if he's just pausing, mentally resetting himself for the next play before he puts them on his rack. And he'll be very pleased, having done that, to see a blank. But Brian has lined up Sasia, which is going to be his best player here. It's his only bonus play, and he's found the best positioning for it as well. It's been pointed out to me as well that Brian's previous play of Ov also actually blocked Caravana for Gary, which would have been very spectacular. So a good play for Brian there, gets him into a lead, but Gary has a strong rack here now, and I would expect to see him come up with a good option here. We could have some fireworks because Brian has just drawn the Z and the blank after his bonus. And he's drawn the Q. So lots of big tiles coming out early in the game here. So Gary has various options here. No playable 7-letter words, but he has a few choices of 8s, which you can try and find. Options through the C at the top of the board. Through the E of Sacia. So I would expect Gary to come up with a good play here. So Gary's highest scoring options here all play through the C. And they all score 78 points. So he might find Prochaine with the blank P. Roaching is an option that he might come up with. There's a quite tricky anagram of Prochaine, which is Parochin. There's also Bronchia, if he makes the blank a B. If he doesn't find any of those, he's got an option through the E of Sacia, which will be a very high probability anti-hero. And he has some other options onto the C as well. Harmonic is another possibility. And he's reached for the slip, so it looks like he's about to circle a tile for the blank. So we'll wait and see what he's chosen here. And it looks like he's playing onto the C. And it looks like a Northic is coming down with a blank T. So that's a nice find. Not an easy word to spot. It looks like he's going to get hit with an absolute bunch of points saved from Brian, though. So he may possibly regret that choice, because Brian is likely to hit Quiz for a huge score here. And I do not expect Brian to take a long time over this move. It's always a risk when you leave a vowel in that position, as Gary has done, and there were better options, but yeah, you probably don't expect to get hit with 114 points, which is what is likely to happen if Brian plays Quiz in that spot. Yeah, and down it goes. And it did play anyway for 88 points, making zone, but that's even more. And I'm going to confidently state that that's probably going to be the highest non-bonus play of the tournament. 114 points for a 4-tile play. So some heavy scoring going on here. And we have Gary, who has drawn a 7-letter word out of the bag. So I would expect to see Gary play a bonus straight back here. He has a couple of options. And he is choosing one of those now. He is playing Trampler. He could actually have played Trample above of to make Roan and Afar. That would have been the highest scoring option. But Trampler is still a good one. Still scores 76 points and keeps him in this game. So still several hotspots on this board for scoring. Brian has picked some high-scoring tiles, the H, the W, and the K, but he's also picked the U and a couple of T's. So he'll be looking to make the most of those scoring tiles on this move. Brian has lined up WHOT, which looks like is probably his highest scoring play here. And that's a good choice. It undoubles the T's, it gets rid of 2 of the clunky tiles, scores 36 points. So a nice find from Brian there. And back to Gary, who has picked 2 E's and some slightly clunkier tiles in the C and the G, which don't go very well together, and the P. So he's just trailing now by 62, and he'll need to try and keep pace with Brian here. You might look at playing something down through the A of Trampler, which would open up some more lanes. Brian is absolutely expert at defending a lead, and Gary is probably aware of that, having played him several times. So he'll know that he can't afford to let Brian close the board down here. So something like Capel or Pagel going down through the A of Trampler would work quite well here for balancing his rack, getting a reasonable score, keeping the board as open as he can. Looks like he is playing down there. Is he playing Glance? Yes, he is. That's a good option as well. EP is not a bad leave. So that keeps Gary in the game, and Brian still has some quite clunky stuff on his rack. The K, the U, and the W. He has a nice place to play the K above his previous play with Uke, EUK. I'll score 36, but it would keep the 4 clunky consonants of B, D, T, W. If he wants to try and address the open lane at the bottom, he could play something down through the L of Trampler like Bulked, which would turn over some tiles and restrict options along the bottom there. We're also aware there's a little bit of glitching going on with the rack cameras, so please bear with us. We will try and address that over the lunch break, which is coming up after this game. So, yeah, thank you for bearing with us. They will have a little rest over lunchtime. Looks like Brian has lined up Bulked, which I previously mentioned as an option. He could be lining up booked instead of bulked, actually, and booked would do a lot of good things for him. It would really address that open lane at the bottom of the board. It would score quite well. Make it very hard for Gary to get anything along that bottom section of the board. So Brian having a good think about this. And he's opting for bulked. Not much to choose between those two plays. Bulked scores 3 points more, so that might be a deciding factor for Brian, just to keep on scoring. Gary, meanwhile, is not far off a bonus, but doesn't have anything available here at the moment. He's got some good tiles on his rack, which he could use for bonusing potentially. But he could see the board getting shut down very quickly here. So he's going to want to keep things open if he does draw into a bonus to have somewhere to play it. Probably want to play off something like the Y and the O, which looks like his best play here. Still keeps that E available for bonuses and keeps a very strong DE IPS. That's a good lead from that rack. Gives him chances next move. So yeah, good and quick choice there by Gary. And back to Brian, who has a 34-point lead and will be looking to maintain that lead and also restrict Gary's comeback options. So he might choose a play here that shuts down the lower left corner of the board, or he might just go for score. There are some good plays that play to the C that he has, and he's lined up Tonemic, which looks like a really strong play. Entomic, the anagram of that, would also play in that same spot. If he wants to play something a bit cuter and go for leave, he could play down through the E of Trumpler. He could play Meow in that spot. Keep EINT, which would potentially lead to a bonus with the G of Glance, but I don't think he'll be prioritizing bonusing here. Brian will be looking to maintain his lead and restrict Gary's comeback chances. So I would not at all be surprised here to see him play Tonemic, which he has lined up. Yeah, and that's a very nice play. Well found there. Board is shutting down absolutely rapidly now. Gary's chances of coming back, not gone, but they're being very restricted. There are very few vowels left. I'm looking from Gary's perspective now. With 4 of the vowels on his rack, there are only 4 more unseen. So Brian could find himself with a very clunky consonant-heavy rack next. But he has drawn some vowels, so not many left in the bag. So what are Gary's options here? We're aware that there's a slight error on the Quackle with the score attribution. We're just getting that fixed now. Brian just checking how many are in the bag. Gary having a long think about what to do here, seeing that his options are getting greatly reduced. He might want to think about playing something on the right-hand side of the board here to just try and open up another lane. And that is looking like what he's doing, and that seems a sensible option. Playing DE, score very much, but it does create some volatility on the board, which is what he needs here. So that's good recognition by Gary that the board shape is not in his favour. But Brian is going to be scoring heavily here. He's drawn the X, and he has a very big scoring play at the bottom left here, which I would expect him to find. He's got a choice of vexed or wexed at the bottom right, bottom left, I beg your pardon. So we have 6 tiles in the bag. Vexed or wexed does everything that Brian needs it to do. It scores 68 points. It leaves 1 in the bag. And it gives him an unassailable lead in the... So again, we're aware that the score on the screen is not currently updated. The correct score is 378 to Brian, 326 to Gary. And that's updated now. Brian has lined up Wexed on his rack, and I'm pretty sure that's what he's about to play. He might be thinking about keeping the V for a block on another move if he needs it. Players just confirming the scores there as well. And Brian has played Wex on the right-hand side, which is an interesting choice. He's obviously decided to address the opening that Gary's just made. Sacrifices quite a lot of points to do that. I'm not sure which is the right option there. But certainly in terms of winning percentage, the move he's played is going to be very high. It kills any chance of a bonus down that side from Gary. So 2 tiles in the bag. Gary's sitting there with not a bonus on his rack, and we'll know now that he's in some trouble. And his last best chance is probably to try and play off 1 tile here and go for something. If that's even possible, because there are not many spaces on this board to play a bonus. Gary's probably checked all his tracking, looking at what's left potentially in the bag, what he could draw. Could he draw into a bonus? Gary does have lots of time left to think about this. He'll be aware that Brian can't really do anything underneath the tonemic area now because there are only 2 vowels left unseen to Gary, both of which are U's. But it's a tricky position for Gary to be in at this stage. He's hasn't really got anywhere that he can open up that couldn't be immediately addressed. And certainly the computer is not giving Gary any chance of winning this game at this point. Any play has less than a 1% chance of winning. Gary quite rightly taking his time here, trying to eke out any possibility that he can somehow sneak this game. But it does look like a fairly forlorn hope at this stage. So one of these players, and looking like Brian, will move on to 16 wins and 4 losses after this game. The other player on 15 wins is Harshan. He's currently playing Colin Northmore. So we could potentially have 2 players on 16 wins with 4 to play. The players will be going to lunch after this game. And the next game, game 21, will be scheduled to be at 10 to 2, so 1:50 p.m. In the meantime, if you're watching and you're enjoying the stream, please do give us a subscribe. We would love to have as many subscribers as possible to this channel. And yeah, do let us know any feedback you have about the stream. Anything constructive is really helpful to help us build this into as big a stream as we can make it. Looks like Gary's getting ready to play off the beat and one of the E's here in the hope of just drawing into something. And he has played BE on top of tonemic. So we're entering the final stages of this game here. Over the lunch break, the pairings for round 21 will be coming available. So do give us a shout and tell us who you'd like to see on the stream. We will be focusing on board 1 or board 2 at this stage as we enter the latter stages of this tournament, featuring the games right at the top of the standings. And we will take your demands into account when deciding who's on the stream for the next 4 rounds. Brian has just got the last few minutes here to try and work out his best endgame. See if he can maximise his scoring. Spread could come into it very much when it's such a close tournament. Might be looking to see if he can make an out in 2 here. His highest scoring play is through the O of Watt, which is Vodun, making Doff. That's 25 points. That's possibly his best play here. So just as Brian assesses his plays here, having a look at the scoreboard to see any of the results that come in. Most of the top games are still playing, or we haven't had the results in for them yet. Mohamed Kamara has just beaten Chris Cummins. He's moved up to 12-8 in 10th place. Piotr Andronowski has beaten Craig Solomons. And Euclid Hui, also from Hong Kong, like Brian, has moved up to 11-9 with a win over Wayne Kelly. As we see Brian play Vend, which is one of his best options here, getting rid of the V and the D. And Gary here picks the J at the end of the game, having played a move, potentially the previous move to try and block any J plays from Brian, picked it himself. But he does have some scoring players at the top of the board here, on top of a Northic. So he can play Je, J-E-U, or he can play J-U-S in the same spot. Both of those score 44 points. Otherwise, he could play something like Dupe, making Age, but that would give back Jut, so he probably won't do that. So I would not be surprised to see something like JEU here. And it looks like Gary has found the best play of JEU. So reduces Brian's his losing margin a little bit as well. Takes Gary up to 388. Brian has already identified his play of Trug. Gary's play actually gave Brian a higher scoring option of Ut for 14. But Trug is fine at this point in the game. Brian's not going to spend a lot of energy trying to find every little point at this point in the game. He'll be relieved he's won this game, and he's still on the winning trail and likely to still be leading after this, depending on the result of Harshan's game. Gary just with 4 tiles left, and he has 2 possible outplay words, tips or pits, and 2 possible places to play them. So I would expect him to play tips or pits at the top right here. And he's just dumped the T for Jot instead. Brian finds his highest scoring outplay of Yelt for 7 points, and that seals a very good win for Brian. He got off to a good start. Probably the moment of that game really was Gary's choice of a Northic when he did have other options available, which gave such a huge score for quiz for Brian. He did have 88 for it anyway, but 114 was huge. The last player's just been challenged, so that'll be an extra 5 points for Yelt for Brian. So that gives Brian a winning margin of 75 in this game. He'll be very happy to have got through that one. Gary, very tough opponent.